Talk to us about this intervention force. To what extent, in your view, do you really think it's likely to be a game changer in Eastern DRC?
Well, I think it has the potential to be a game changer. I think the United Nations certainly hopes it will be a game changer. But the force is mandated to do targeted offensive operations. So this is sort of really the first time that a peacekeeping mission has an element that's peace enforcement. So they're going to go after the bad guys, in other words. And I think it can work, but only if it's combined with two other important elements. And in this case, that's if the DRC steps up and fulfills the commitments that it's made, in other words, to reform its military and to improve rule of law. And then the third element would be if this framework agreement that was signed in Addis in February with 11 countries and neighbors from the region, if that framework agreement for peace and security is implemented, then I think you have a chance for a game changer and an end to nearly 2 decades of human rights violations and conflict and misery in the Eastern Congo.
But Margaret, what about the other element, perhaps one of the most, in fact, important element, which is the rebel M23? Don't they matter?
Well, of course they matter. I mean, the intervention brigades are there to deal with the M23. And, one of the things that we've heard a lot from the UN Secretary General and from Mary Robinson, the new Great Lakes envoy, she's in the region right now, is that the root causes of the conflict must be addressed. So I think that comes into it. You have to address the root causes of why the M23 mutinied. You have to address this as one of the pieces of the puzzle to get to reconciliation and peace.
But what about the fact that we gather that the talks that had actually been going on in the Ugandan capital, Kampala, under the auspices of the Great Lakes region, appear, frankly, not to have brought out anything? In fact, some people have been referring to those talks in Kampala as peace jokes.
Well, I'm not in Kampala, so I don't think I can really speak to it. I can only tell you what I'm seeing from my perch here at the UN. And here at the UN, there's really a call for there to be political will in the region to support the intervention brigade. Let's not forget that SADC and the AU and the International Conference on the Great Lakes region, these 3 regional bodies all called for this intervention brigade. They were the ones who asked for it. So I think that gives them a certain responsibility to make sure that this is a success.
What about the fact that the M23 themselves, including the regional powers, we're talking about Rwanda and Uganda, they really don't seem to be on the same page?
Well, publicly, Rwanda says they are, and they did vote. Right now, Rwanda is a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. Yesterday, they wrapped up a month-long presidency of the council. Some people felt it was a bit controversial that they were going to be on the council, particularly in light of problems going on in Congo. But they are there, and they are saying that they're going to uphold this mission, and they're going to uphold the framework agreement. So we need to see that really happen on the ground. I mean, that's the true test. Everyone can talk, but we have to see what happens on the ground to see if there really is the commitment to making it happen and for the interference to stop. And don't forget, in addition to the intervention brigades, the UN for the first time will be deploying unarmed drones in the skies over the eastern DRC. They're expecting to have about 3 of them. And they're going to be there to collect information on arms embargo violators and on the movement of rebel groups such as the M23. So there's going to be a lot more tools at the disposal of the UN and of MONUSCO. So hopefully maybe this will help deter countries from interfering. And it might hopefully deter the rebel groups from trying to make advances on cities like Goma again.
What about the intervention brigade, Margaret? How soon is it likely to be deployed? Because we've been hearing June and July.
Well, when they passed the resolution at the end of March, the Security Council expected it to take about 2 months for it to be on the ground. And I checked with Peacekeeping today. They tell me that there's a planning team on the ground in Congo right now, and that they expect a significant number of the 3,000, roughly 3,000 troops in the intervention brigades to be in place, deployed in the latter half of May. So we're looking at about 2 or 3 more weeks. But don't forget, they're not all new troops coming from outside. One of the battalions is already a part of MONUSCO, so they're just being redeployed from within Congo. So the deployment should move rapidly now that they have the planning team on the ground.
Margaret, there are some doubting Thomases who have been saying that there is really no political will, especially from the UN Security Council, that if in fact New York wanted to help solve the problem, that this problem in the Congo would in fact have been solved yesterday. I was a kid, and I told you earlier that I was born and grew up in Kabale, which is not very far from where the problems are. From the time the Congo got independence in 1960, we've been hearing about UN peacekeeping forces. And this is 50 years later. We're still talking about the same thing.
Right. Well, I don't think you can lay the blame for that at the feet of the United Nations. I think a lot of it has to go to the feet of the government of Congo. When I was in Kinshasa 2 years ago in May of 2010, President Kabila did not want MONUC, which is the predecessor of MONUSCO, the previous UN mission, to remain. He wanted them to go because it was time, it was coming up on that 50th anniversary of independence, and he wanted to show that he was in charge and his military was strong, and he didn't want peacekeepers there because he thought it made him look weak. And the UN Security Council had to basically appeal to him to keep them. And that's when they changed their name to MONUSCO, became a stabilization mission, slightly changed their mandate. But as we have seen in the past 2.5 years, 3 years, they really still need outside help. The FARDC is not capable of protecting civilians in the eastern DRC. In fact, as we have seen in Minova in November, 2 battalions have been accused of raping 126 women in the eastern DRC. So how can this military protect its people when it's, accused of atrocities against them? So I don't think you can lay all the blame at the feet of the UN. They're doing the best they can with what they have.
Well, thanks very much, Margaret, for your insight.